Hip hop, the hip to the hip hop. You don't stop. Rock it to the bang bang.
She was called the mother of hip-hop, yet her name often drifts in the shadows of music history. Before she ever changed the world with Rapper's Delight in 1979, Sylvia Robinson was already shaping sound with Love is Strange in 1957 and seducing the airwaves with Pillow Talk in 1973. How can one woman be the spark that lit rock and roll, disco, and hip-hop yet remain so underrated, so controversial? Was she a fearless visionary who gave a voice to a culture, or a hustler who played the game too hard? Her story is full of triumph, betrayal, innovation, and pain. Let's get into her story right now. Sylvia Vanderpool was born on the 29th of May, 1935, in Harlem, New York, a neighborhood that pulsed with rhythm long before the world called it music. Her parents were of modest means. Her father worked as a construction laborer, and her mother kept the home. Harlem, in the 1930s, was a mixture of resilience and hardship, where gospel choirs filled the churches on Sunday and the blues leaked out of basement clubs on Saturday night. For a child with sensitive ears and a bold spirit, it was the perfect incubator. From an early age, Sylvia was drawn to sound. Family members recalled her singing to herself before she could even write her own name. By the time she was a teenager, her voice carried the grit of the streets and the sweetness of Sunday service. Unlike many children of her age, Sylvia was not shy. She believed her talent could take her beyond the crowded apartments and narrow sidewalks of Harlem. In the early 1950 period, she began chasing opportunity. She performed in local talent shows, caught the attention of small-time producers, and soon landed on the radar of record men looking for the next spark. Sylvia's first break came in 1950 when she signed with Columbia Records under the stage name Little Sylvia. She was only 15, recording rhythm and blues tracks with a youthful confidence that belied her age. The industry was not kind to young black women at the time. Contracts were slim, payments were slimmer, and recognition often went to someone else. Still, Sylvia stood out. Her ability to blend blues rawness with pop polish made her an undeniable presence. The turning point in her teenage years came when she met guitarist Mickey Baker, a sharp-dressed, sharp-playing session musician who had already built a reputation in New York's clubs. Mickey recognized her spark, and together they formed the duo Mickey and Sylvia. Their chemistry was undeniable, both musically and personally. In 1957, they released Love is Strange, a playful, flirtatious record built around call and response vocals and Mickey's guitar riffs. The song exploded, climbing charts and becoming one of the defining hits of the era. Yet even in triumph, Sylvia's role was underrated. Many saw Mickey as the driving force, the seasoned musician, the man with the chop. Sylvia, though, was more than just the female counterpoint she brought. The sass, the charisma, and the vocal energy that made Love is Strange unforgettable. Still, in press coverage and industry chatter, her name was often treated as secondary. This early taste of the music industry taught Sylvia a lesson. Talent alone wasn't enough. You needed vision, strategy, and a willingness to fight for your space. After Love is Strange, Mickey and Sylvia continued recording and performing, but the magic of that one hit overshadowed their other work. The duo's partnership was stormy, full of creative sparks but also personal disagreements. By the early 1960 period, they parted ways. For many women in music, this would have been the end one big hit, a short run of fame, then silence. But Sylvia was not content to be a one-hit wonder. She carried herself with quiet determination, vowing that she would not fade into the background. During this period, she also started a family. Balancing the role of wife and mother with the relentless grind of music was never easy. Still, Sylvia continued to record, sometimes stepping away, sometimes stepping back in. She collaborated with other musicians, wrote songs, and kept one eye on the changing landscape of rhythm and blues. The 1960 period saw soul music rise, Motown dominate, and the groundwork for funk being laid. Sylvia absorbed it all, watching carefully, sharpening her instincts. What set her apart even in these early years was not just her voice, but her vision. She saw music not only as art but as business. Unlike many of her peers who left financial matters to managers and labels, Sylvia paid attention. She saw how artists were underpaid, how record companies exploited talent. She saw opportunities where others saw only rejection. These observations planted the seeds of the empire she would one day build. Looking back, Sylvia's early life was a tapestry of gospel roots, street rhythms, a breakout hit, and quiet frustrations. Harlem shaped her toughness. The industry taught her caution, and Mickey and Sylvia gave her proof that she could command an audience. But perhaps the most underrated element of her early years was her resilience. Even when her name slipped off the charts, she never stopped moving. She never let the industry decide her ending. By the time the 1970 period approached, Sylvia Robinson was no longer just Little Sylvia. She was a woman with scars, lessons, and a vision that stretched far beyond the microphone. She was ready to step not only onto the stage but behind the scenes, where power and control truly live. After the turbulence of the Mickey and Sylvia chapter, Sylvia Robinson refused to fade into the background. By the late 1960 period, she had stepped into a new phase of her career, determined to carve out her own identity apart from Mickey Baker. She had already proven she could deliver a hit, but now she wanted to prove she could do it on her own terms. Sylvia's solo journey began with a renewed focus on songwriting and performance. She experimented with different labels, cutting tracks that showed off her ability to move between rhythm and blues, pop, and even early hints of disco grooves. While many women in the industry were typecast as pretty voices to decorate male-driven projects, Sylvia saw herself as more than a singer. She was a writer, a producer, a creative force. The defining moment of her solo career came in 1973 with the release of Pillow Talk. The track was a sultry, sensual record that pushed boundaries for its time. Its moans, whispers, and playful lyrics were both scandalous and irresistible. Some radio stations hesitated to play it, but audiences ate it up. Pillow Talk shot up the Billboard charts, reaching #1 on the R&B chart and #3 on the Hot 100. Suddenly, Sylvia was not just remembered as part of Mickey and Sylvia, she was a solo star in her own right. The success of Pillow Talk marked a dramatic reinvention. At nearly 40 years old, when many artists, especially women, were considered past their prime, Sylvia delivered one of the sexiest, most daring songs of the decade. Fans recall seeing her perform it on Soul Train, where her confidence and charisma captivated viewers. Even children watching at the time remembered the allure, the way her presence filled the stage. It was a cultural moment that proved Sylvia Robinson had staying power. But success was never just about the spotlight for Sylvia. Behind the microphone, she was sharpening another skill: business. She had seen too many artists lose control of their careers, and she vowed not to repeat their mistakes. Alongside her husband, Joe Robinson, she started laying the foundation for something bigger than a hit single. The two of them envisioned an independent label that could rival the majors, one that could give artists a platform while also keeping ownership in their own hands. In this period, Sylvia's reputation grew not only as a singer but as a savvy operator. She was one of the few women in the male-dominated world of record production who could walk into a studio, direct musicians, and walk out with a polished hit. The industry wasn't always welcoming. Sexism was rampant, and women who asserted authority were often labeled difficult. Yet Sylvia pressed forward, knowing that her survival depended on commanding respect, not waiting for it. The early 1970 period was a transitional chapter. On the surface, she was the woman who gave the world Pillow Talk, a track that would influence future artists from Donna Summer to Janet Jackson. But beneath that success, she was setting the stage for something that would change the direction of popular music forever. By proving she could reinvent herself, Sylvia Robinson showed she was not just chasing trends, she was building the tools to create them. In hindsight, Part 3 Amperes of Sylvia's story is about rebirth. From teen sensation to half of a famous duo, from struggling solo artist to chart-topping star, she demonstrated a rare resilience. She refused to let age, gender, or industry politics box her in. And as she basked in the glow of Pillow Talk, she was already preparing for the next bold move, stepping off the stage and into the control room, where her legacy would truly take root. The success of Pillow Talk gave Sylvia Robinson more than just a hit record, it gave her leverage. While the music world celebrated her sultry reinvention, Sylvia and her husband Joe Robinson were plotting something larger, an empire. They understood that artists often had fleeting fame, but record companies held the real power. If Sylvia wanted control, if she wanted to secure her place in history, She had to step behind the microphone and run the business itself. In the early 1970 period, Sylvia and Joe founded All Platinum Records, based in Englewood, New Jersey. At first glance, it was a modest, independent label operating outside the major hubs of New York and Los Angeles. But All Platinum quickly became a powerhouse in its own lane. The label specialized in rhythm and blues, funk, and soul, cultivating talent that the majors often overlooked. One of their first big successes came with The Moments, a vocal group whose tender ballads struck a chord with audiences. Songs like Love on a Two-Way Street and Look at Me, I'm in Love, showcased All Platinum's knack for soulful, emotionally charged music. These records didn't just make the charts, they lingered in the hearts of listeners, played at weddings, dances, and late-night radio shows. Sylvia wasn't just running a label, she was curating the soundtrack of real people's lives. Beyond The Moments, All Platinum worked with artists like Donnie Elbert, whose soulful voice and reinterpretations of classics added depth to the label's catalog. Tracks such as Where Did Our Love Go became staples, reminding fans that independent labels could compete with Motown and Atlantic when given the right vision. Sylvia had an ear for songs that blended raw emotion with commercial appeal. But running a label was never easy. The Robinsons faced constant battles with distribution, radio airplay, and the deep pockets of the majors. Yet Sylvia's determination never wavered. She became known for her persistence, often personally promoting records to DJs, making phone calls, and ensuring her artists received the spotlight they deserved. This hustle separated her from executives who relied solely on corporate infrastructure. What made All Platinum unique was Sylvia's dual identity. She was both an artist and an executive. She knew firsthand the frustrations of being underpaid and undervalued, and she brought that empathy to the label. Artists trusted her because she spoke their language. Still, the business was a battlefield, and the Robinsons had to navigate lawsuits, financial strain, and the politics of radio stations that sometimes resisted independent labels. Even so, All Platinum laid the groundwork for Sylvia's most groundbreaking venture. By the mid-1970 period, disco was dominating the charts, and R&B was evolving. Sylvia sensed a shift. She began to notice a new sound bubbling from the streets, block parties in the Bronx, DJs looping breakbeats, kids rhyming over records. While most executives dismissed it as a fad, Sylvia recognized potential. She believed this raw street energy could translate into records that would sell worldwide. All Platinum had given Sylvia the tools, the experience, and the confidence to take risks. The label proved she could sign, develop, and promote artists outside the mainstream system. But she wanted more than success in the soul market. She wanted to break barriers, to take something underground and bring it into the global spotlight. By the late 1970 period, Sylvia and Joe began shifting their focus from All Platinum to a new vision, a label that would capture the emerging voice of a generation. That vision would become Sugar Hill Records. While All Platinum never achieved the fame of Motown, it was crucial it trained Sylvia to survive in a cutthroat business, sharpened her instincts, and positioned her to make one of the most daring moves in music history. Looking back, Career Rise Part 3B is not just about building a label, it's about preparation. All Platinum was the classroom where Sylvia Robinson learned how to run a company, nurture artists, and fight the giants of the industry. And when hip-hop came knocking, she was ready to open the door and change the culture forever. By the end of the 1970 period, Sylvia Robinson had already reinvented herself multiple times, singer, songwriter, producer, label owner, but nothing could prepare her, or the world, for the revolution she was about to unleash. What began as a curiosity at Bronx block parties would soon become a cultural tidal wave. And Sylvia, always listening, always scanning the streets for the next sound, was the one who saw its potential. One night, in 1979, Sylvia attended a Harlem birthday party where she witnessed something unusual. A DJ was looping records while young men rhymed over the beats, making up clever lines that had the crowd electrified. This wasn't polished R&B or disco, it was raw, improvised, alive. Where others dismissed it as neighborhood fun, Sylvia saw a business opportunity. She later recalled telling her son, "This is $1 million idea." Wasting no time, she set out to capture that sound on wax. The result was Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang. Recorded in a single take using the instrumental break from Cheek's Good Times, the track stretched over 14 minutes. It was unlike anything radio programmers had ever heard. Yet the moment it hit the airwaves, it was undeniable. DJs played it at parties, teenagers memorized every rhyme, and suddenly, rap was no longer confined to parks and gyms, it was a commercial force. For many fans, the first time hearing Rapper's Delight was unforgettable. Commenters recall walking through school hallways with boom boxes blasting the song, kids spitting verses word for word, and the sense that a new era had arrived. The record broke barriers, becoming the first rap single to crack the Billboard Hot 100, where it peaked at number 36, and it sold millions of copies worldwide. Sylvia Robinson had done the impossible. She took a street movement and transformed it into a global phenomenon. Without her gamble, the sound of hip-hop might have remained underground for years longer. Her role was visionary. She believed rap could succeed commercially at a time when no major label would touch it. But while Rapper's Delight was revolutionary, it was also controversial. Critics pointed out that members of the Sugar Hill Gang weren't part of the original Bronx hip-hop pioneers. Others accused Sylvia of exploiting the culture, packaging it for profit. Still, the record's success could not be denied. It gave rap legitimacy in the mainstream, proving there was an audience far beyond the block. The release of Rapper's Delight also marked the official launch of Sugar Hill Records, named after the Harlem neighborhood that represented black elegance and creativity. Sylvia ran the label with Joe Robinson and their family, turning it into the epicenter of early hip-hop recordings. Almost overnight, Sugar Hill became the place where DJs, MCs, and young dreamers flocked to, hoping for their chance at the mic. The impact of that one record rippled across the globe. In London, Paris, and Tokyo, kids who had never set foot in the Bronx were suddenly rapping along to verses they barely understood. For older listeners, it was confusing, half singing, half talking, but for the younger generation, it felt like the future. Rapper's Delight wasn't just a song. It was a cultural announcement that hip-hop had arrived. Sylvia Robinson had once again proven herself to be more than just an artist. She was a trend spotter, a gatekeeper, and a businesswoman with the courage to take risks others avoided. With one daring release, she changed music history. But Rapper's Delight was only the beginning. Even greater triumphs and deeper controversies waited just around the corner. If Rapper's Delight opened the door, the next wave of Sugar Hill Records kicked it wide open. Sylvia Robinson was not content with a one-hit wonder. She wanted to build a catalog that proved hip-hop was here to stay. Her next masterstroke came in 1982 with The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Unlike the playful braggadocio of Rapper's Delight, The Message was raw social commentary. With lines like, "Don't push me, 'cause I'm close to the edge," the song captured the desperation of urban America, poverty, crime, broken systems. This wasn't just party music, it was a mirror reflecting life in the Bronx and beyond. For the first time, rap carried the weight of protest, the urgency of truth-telling. Critics hailed it as a landmark, and Rolling Stone would later call it one of the greatest songs ever recorded. Sylvia's genius was recognizing that hip-hop didn't need to be one-dimensional. She believed it could party and preach, entertain and educate. The Message became the blueprint for conscious rap, paving the way for everyone from Public Enemy to Nas. In many ways, Sylvia had not just commercialized hip-hop, she had legitimized it as an art form. But Sugar Hill's contributions didn't stop there. Under Sylvia's watch, the label signed The Sequence, widely credited as the first all-female rap group to record commercially. Their track, Funk You Up, in 1979 was groundbreaking, proving that women could hold their own in a genre often dominated by men. One of the members, Angie Stone, would later become a respected neo-soul artist, but it was Sylvia who gave her that first platform. In doing so, Sylvia expanded hip-hop's boundaries, giving voice to women and reminding the industry that this culture was for everyone. These triumphs solidified Sylvia's reputation as the queen of hip-hop. While other executives scoffed at rap, she doubled down, investing money, time, and energy into an art form that had no guarantees. She saw what others couldn't or wouldn't. For fans, Sugar Hill became synonymous with the birth of hip-hop records. For artists, it was both an opportunity and a cautionary tale, as stories of unfair contracts began to swirl. Still, there's no denying the cultural force Sylvia unleashed. In classrooms, kids scribbled rhymes in their notebooks. On street corners, boom boxes blasted the latest Sugar Hill singles. Across the ocean, European clubs were spinning rap records alongside disco and funk. What began in the Bronx had gone global, and Sylvia Robinson was at the center of it. Yet, even at the height of her success, controversy followed. Some argued that Sylvia's choices sidelined the original Bronx pioneers who had built the culture before records existed. Others accused her of packaging authenticity for profit. But history is rarely clean. Without Sylvia, the sound might never have reached the mainstream at all. The paradox was clear. She was both savior and suspect, visionary and villain, depending on who you asked. By the mid-1980 period, Sugar Hill Records had created a foundation that future giants would stand on. The message, the sequence, and countless singles proved hip-hop wasn't a passing fad, it was a movement. And Sylvia Robinson, with her sharp instincts and relentless drive, was its most unlikely architect. But as the empire grew, so did the pressures. Success brought money, fame, and influence, but also lawsuits, betrayals, and financial storms. The same boldness that made Sylvia a pioneer would soon lead her into conflict with the very culture she helped birth. For every empire that rises, shadows follow close behind. By the early 1980 period, Sylvia Robinson's Sugar Hill Records was flying high, but storm clouds were gathering. The same daring moves that made her a pioneer also made her enemies. And the very artists she introduced to the world soon accused her of betrayal. One of the most painful controversies centered on the Sugar Hill Gang, the group Sylvia assembled to record Rapper's Delight. While the record sold millions, members later claimed they never saw the royalties they were owed. Hank, Wonder Mike, and Master G told stories of receiving a one-time payment while the company kept the publishing and profits. Fans online still debate these claims, with some calling Sylvia a visionary businesswoman and others accusing her of robbing the pioneers of hip-hop. Master G faced an especially cruel twist. He reportedly lost the rights to his own stage name. Imagine being unable to legally perform under the very name that made you famous. To many observers, it was proof of how predatory the business could be, even under the guidance of someone hailed as the mother of hip-hop. Other artists echoed similar frustrations. Musicians associated with Sugar Hill described being sidelined, underpaid, or locked out of their royalties. The Sequence, Grandmaster Flash, and others would later speak about unfair contracts. In the heat of hip-hop's rise, Sylvia was juggling ambition, survival, and control. To her, keeping the label afloat may have justified hard business practices, but to the artists, it felt like betrayal. The criticism extended beyond finances. Some accused Sylvia of packaging a culture she didn't create. Bronx DJs and MCs had been building hip-hop since the early 1970 period at block parties, yet Sugar Hill Records spotlighted artists chosen for their marketability rather than their authenticity. Purists saw this as exploitation, the corporate capture of a grassroots movement. At the same time, Sylvia was facing personal pressures. Being a black woman executive in a male-dominated industry came with constant scrutiny. Competitors doubted her, colleagues underestimated her, and rivals painted her as manipulative. To survive, she often had to play harder than her opponents, which only fueled her reputation as both brilliant and ruthless. The contradictions were stark. On one hand, Sylvia Robinson had given hip-hop its first commercial platform, turning a local phenomenon into a worldwide sensation. On the other, she was accused of silencing and cheating the very voices she claimed to elevate. Was she a savior or a hustler? Fans and historians still wrestle with that question today. But behind the headlines, one truth remained. The stress was immense. Running Sugar Hill meant constant battles over money, rights, and reputation. Sylvia carried the weight not just of a label but of an entire culture on her shoulders. And while she smiled in public, in private the cracks were beginning to show. Conflict Part 5, Amperes, captures the paradox of Sylvia Robinson. She was the mother of an empire, but the children of that empire often felt abandoned. It was a painful irony, one that would haunt her legacy for decades to come. As the 1980 period moved forward, Sugar Hill Records found itself fighting for survival. What had begun as a groundbreaking independent label now faced mounting legal battles and financial collapse. The very empire Sylvia Robinson built with fearless vision was crumbling under the weight of lawsuits, rivalries, and betrayal. One of the toughest blows came in the mid-1980 period when Sugar Hill became entangled in disputes with MCA over distribution. Independent labels often relied on bigger partners to move their records into stores nationwide, and when deals soured, so did the money flow. The battles drained resources, stalled projects, and left Sylvia struggling to keep her roster active. For artists who had trusted Sugar Hill to elevate them, delays and uncertainty bred resentment. Meanwhile, the industry itself was shifting. Def Jam, Profile, and Tommy Boy were rising, armed with fresh sounds and younger executives who courted the next wave of talent. Sugar Hill, once the vanguard, began to look dated. The raw street energy that had fueled Rapper's Delight and The Message now demanded new production styles, harder beats, and different narratives. Sylvia's instincts had brought hip-hop to vinyl, but staying ahead of the culture proved harder than launching it. Behind the scenes, personal pain compounded professional turmoil. Sylvia's husband and partner, Joe Robinson, was her anchor through decades of struggle and success. When his health began to decline, the family's foundation shook. His eventual passing left Sylvia not only widowed but burdened with the responsibility of running the label largely on her own. Fans remember her strength, but those close to her spoke of exhaustion, of a woman who had given everything to music yet found little peace in return. Critics, meanwhile, were unsparing. They claimed karma had caught up with her. On fan forums and later in documentaries, people argued that the way she handled artists retaining control of royalties and publishing was the very reason her empire collapsed. Supporters countered that she had simply played by the same ruthless rules the majors used, but because she was a woman, she became an easier target. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the middle. By the late 1980 period, Sugar Hill Records had lost much of its luster. Lawsuits dragged on, artists left for greener pastures, and the company's once towering reputation dimmed. Yet Sylvia Robinson remained a figure of fascination, a pioneer whose brilliance was inseparable from controversy. She had opened doors for hip-hop, but also left scars that never healed. Conflict Part 5B shows Sylvia at her most human. No longer just the visionary who introduced rap to the world, she became the subject of criticism, gossip, and doubt. Her empire was shaking, her family was suffering, and her own health began to falter. Still, she refused to disappear. Sylvia Robinson was nothing if not resilient, and even in the darkest chapters, her name carried weight. When the dust of the 1980 period settled, one thing was undeniable. Sylvia Robinson had already carved her place in music history. The empire of Sugar Hill Records may have faltered, but the sound she unleashed never went back into the shadows. Hip-hop only grew bigger, crossing oceans, topping charts, and shaping generations. And through it all, Sylvia's fingerprints remained. Her most obvious legacy lies in the way she gave hip-hop its first commercial voice. Without Rapper's Delight, there may have been no immediate bridge between the Bronx block parties and the global stage. The record proved that this new form of expression could compete with disco, rock, and soul on the airwaves. Every rapper who followed, from Run DMC to Jay-Z, built on a foundation Sylvia helped pour. But her influence extended beyond one record. By championing The Message, she legitimized rap as a vehicle for storytelling and social commentary. That song inspired entire movements, giving artists permission to tackle poverty, crime, and inequality through rhyme. Chuck D of Public Enemy once said rap was the black CNN. That lineage can be traced back to Sylvia Robinson, who insisted that hip-hop could be more than party chants, it could be truth-telling in rhythm. Another crucial part of her legacy is gender. In an industry dominated by men, Sylvia stood as a rare example of a black woman who held power at the executive level. She was not simply a singer who faded into nostalgia. She was a label boss, a deal maker, a visionary who dared to take risks that even male executives avoided. For younger women in the music industry, whether executives like Sylvia Rohn or artists like Queen Latifah and Missy Elliott, Sylvia Robinson's career stands as proof that women could lead, innovate, and redefine the business. Her role in pushing the sequence into the spotlight further cements this legacy. By signing the first female rap group, Sylvia created space for women in hip-hop at a time when many dismissed the genre as male territory. Angie Stone, one of the members, would later carry that influence into her own career, but it was Sylvia who first opened the mic for her. Today, when female rappers dominate charts worldwide, from Nicki Minaj to Cardi B, there's a straight line back to Sylvia's bold decision to amplify women's voices in 1979. Sylvia also influenced the business side of music. Though criticized for her contracts, she demonstrated the importance of ownership and independence. In founding All Platinum and Sugar Hill, she proved that black entrepreneurs could run labels, distribute records, and create hits without the backing of major corporations. Her model inspired others, from Russell Simmons with Def Jam to Master P with No Limit. Even Sean Diddy Combs echoed Sylvia's playbook of blending artistry with entrepreneurship. For fans, her legacy lives in memories as much as records. They recall seeing her on Soul Train, performing Pillow Talk, exuding a confidence and sensuality rarely seen on television in the early 1970 period. They remember the Applejack hat she wore, the effortless style that made her stand out. They remember the excitement of boom boxes in schoolyards, where kids rapped Rapper's Delight word for word. Sylvia Robinson was part of their youth, their culture, their soundtrack. Legacy Part 6 Amperes reveals Sylvia not just as a pioneer of hip-hop, but as a cultural architect. She gave voice to a generation, power to women, and vision to independent labels. Her story is messy, full of contradictions, but greatness often. Island. And while she was underrated in her lifetime, the ripple effects of her work continued to define the sound of modern music. To fully understand Sylvia Robinson's legacy, we must remember that her story did not begin with hip-hop. Long before Sugar Hill Records shook the world, Sylvia was shaping culture through rhythm and blues. Her work with Mickey Baker on Love is Strange in 1957 remains one of the most enduring records of its era, a song that found new life in films like Dirty Dancing and became a standard across generations. Then came Pillow Talk in 1973, a record that was daring, sensual, and ahead of its time. For many, that track opened the door for the wave of disco and quiet storm records that would follow. Sylvia's influence stretched across decades and genres, proving she was never confined to one sound. Fans never forgot. In comments and interviews, people recall watching her perform Pillow Talk on Soul Train, mesmerized by her confidence and allure. Others remember hearing her sultry voice late at night on radio programs, the kind of sound that made young listeners blush and older listeners nod knowingly. Even outside of hip-hop, Sylvia had left an indelible mark on the intimacy and sensuality of black music. Yet, despite her accomplishments, Sylvia Robinson often went unrecognized. Unlike Clive Davis, Berry Gordy, or other famous label heads, her name rarely appears in mainstream histories of American music. She was celebrated by insiders but often overlooked by the wider industry. This gap in recognition frustrates fans, many of whom have publicly asked why Sylvia does not have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. They see her as a trailblazer who deserves the same honors given to executives who contributed far less to the culture. That yearning for recognition speaks to the heart of her legacy. Sylvia was simultaneously a visionary and underrated. She could stand shoulder to shoulder with the most powerful figures in the industry, but she rarely received the same spotlight. Perhaps it was because she was a woman, or because her business practices left scars, or because hip-hop itself was dismissed by the establishment for so long. Whatever the reason, history has been slow to give her the flowers she earned. And yet, in the memories of fans, she remains larger than life. They remember her Applejack hat, her baby hairs, the glamorous way she carried herself. They remember the sense of discovery when they first heard Rapper's Delight on a boombox, or the feeling of empowerment hearing the sequence break barriers for women. They remember the nights when Sylvia's records made them dance, cry, and dream. Her legacy also continues in the artists who built on her foundation. Naughty by Nature, discovered through her network, carried the New Jersey sound into the 1990 period. Angie Stone transformed from pioneering rapper into soul queen. Countless rappers, singers, and executives studied Sylvia's blueprint of creativity fused with entrepreneurship. Even when they criticized her, they copied her moves. Legacy Part 6B reminds us that Sylvia Robinson was never just one thing. She was a singer, a songwriter, a label head, a visionary, and yes, a controversial figure. She bridged R&B, disco, and hip-hop, touching each era with her unique voice. And though her name may not yet be carved on the Walk of Fame, it lives permanently in the grooves of vinyl, the echoes of block parties, and the memories of millions. For every beat that pulses in modern hip-hop, for every female executive who dares to lead, for every fan who still hums "Love is Strange" or whispers along to "Pillow Talk," Sylvia Robinson's spirit remains alive. Her story is one of brilliance, contradiction, and resilience, and while the world may have underrated her, the culture never will. Sylvia Robinson's story is a paradox, one that refuses to fit neatly into the boxes of hero or villain. She was the teenager who gave the world "Love is Strange," the daring soloist who whispered through "Pillow Talk," and the fearless executive who pressed rappers' delight onto vinyl when no one else would. She opened the door for hip-hop to step into the mainstream, then pushed it further with "The Message," proving rap could carry the weight of real-life struggles. For all of this, she earned the title Mother of Hip-Hop. And yet, her name is also wrapped in controversy. To the Sugar Hill Gang and others, she represented broken promises and lost royalties. To critics, she packaged a street culture for profit, while sidelining its original architects. Even now, debates rage online. Was Sylvia a visionary who saved hip-hop from obscurity, or a hustler who played the industry's ruthless game a little too well? What cannot be denied is her impact. Every rapper who picked up a mic after 1979, every female artist who demanded respect in a male-dominated world, and every independent label that fought to control its masters owes something to Sylvia Robinson's example. She showed what was possible, sometimes through brilliance, sometimes through mistakes, but always through courage. Perhaps that is the essence of being underrated. History remembers the sanitized legends, while the complicated figures remain in the shadows. Sylvia's story forces us to wrestle with contradiction, to acknowledge that greatness often comes with flaws. She was not perfect, but she was necessary. So we end with the question, should Sylvia Robinson stand beside Berry Gordy and Clive Davis as one of music's great architects? Or should her legacy be measured differently through the beats that still echo, the artists who still thrive, and the fans who still remember her hat, her voice, and her vision? Whatever the answer, one truth remains. Her name may never shine as brightly as some, but her influence is carved into the DNA of modern music. Sylvia Robinson lives on in every rhyme, every sample, and every rhythm that shakes the world today.